guys, welcome back to the channel. Last episode, we worked on this guy. We have a Ford 9-inch Grand National housing dropped in our C1500 OBS custom chassis designed by me. We went ahead and installed this Grand National 9-inch and everything worked out great. We got great articulation, everything's no binding, which on a 3-link, it should be the case. And we're really happy with that. This episode, what we're going to work on, we're gonna build our own sway bar setup. So we're going with something I'm very familiar with, some of you guys might not be familiar with, but it is a cheap and affordable way of making a really nice adjustable sway bar setup that if you guys aren't familiar with dirt track racing, maybe you should be. So dirt track racing has a lot of great parts available. They're relatively cheap and high quality because guys wreck cars all the time. So we were able to get our hands on some sprint car parts that we're gonna use to build a torsion bar setup. Or not torsion bar setup, I'm sorry, sway bar setup using torsion bars. Okay, so we just got done cutting out our riser brackets. So this is gonna be our sway bar risers. And we're going to clean these up, knock some of the burrs off of it. Got the machine draining now, and we're gonna get these bent. So what these brackets are going to do is we'll bend them, and they are going to be welded under here, like so. So you can see that there's a taper there, and that taper indexes on that bend. And that's where the sway bar bearings are going to mount. So let's get these ground down and get them bent up. Okay, so we got those pieces all bent up, and what we're gonna do now is we're gonna weld in these support brackets. These are placed right up in here, and those will have the profile of the frame rail where it is welded up and around. So we're gonna go ahead and take these in now. Okay, so we got these all welded up. I'm really happy with them. They look nice. So this is only 1/8 inch thick material, but you're gonna see how these are loaded, that this is gonna be plenty strong for what we're going to do. How these are mounted, I'll grab the passenger side one here. These are coming up underneath the frame rail, and they are placed like this. It's sort of hard because that one bar is in the way, but they get tucked up in there, and that's why there's that radius towards the end. And then on this way here, you can see that there's a gusset vertical stiffener here. So that's a very strong design. Now, what we're doing is we're gonna be mounting this sway bar to it. So we'll get into the details of this here in a minute, but this is a bearing strap holder. And this will be mount like this on the bottom surface and retain this bar to these mounts. Now, more details about the sway bar setup. So, these are some sealed roller bearings, stainless steel housing that are set screwed onto a sprint car torsion bar. So this is a 30-inch torsion bar out of a sprint car. And these come in all sorts of different twist rates depending on how the taper and inner diameter of the bar is set up. On the ends, for the end links, what we're using, these are pitman arms from a sprint car steering rack, and this is what we will use to tie our end links for the sway bar to the rear housing. So the rear housing here will have a stud coming out this way. The sway bar will obviously be mounted there with that pitman arm coming back this way, and then there will be some hymens that connect it down here. So next up, what we need to do is get these parts sort of trimmed. I have like a little high spot here I need to grind off, and right there I need to grind off. We're gonna get those cleaned up. We're gonna drive the welder out here, get this all weld prepped and clean metal down here, and then we're gonna weld those in place. So need to do all my dimensions. We're gonna set all the dimensions off of the rear axle, and I guess we can get started on it. Let's go.
Perfect.
Okay guys, so we got it all welded up here, and you can tell everything is good and solid, and we got the vertical supports, they fit up nice, and then the radius, I just had to trim a little bit on this side, but I'm pretty happy. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and get the sway bar assembly mounted up as we have it right now, and see how she fits. Okay guys, so we got the sway bar installed there. And you can see here, fits up nicely. We're gonna have some good reach here to this bar, or to this sleeve where we're gonna run the sway bar connections. And I'm really happy for the money what these Pitman arms run. They should be good and sturdy for what we're trying to do. Our rear sway bar rates aren't gonna be as stiff as our front, so we can get away with those on the rear. On the front sway bar, we're gonna have to run a little bit stiffer sway bar, so we might have to step it up a little bit on the arms that we run. But for the money, this should be a sweet setup. So I'm pretty happy. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and get the shoulder bolts ordered. We're gonna remount the holes on these sleeves and see if we can get these Heim ends or Heim joints all installed and see how she articulates. Okay, so it's a couple days later. I got a couple of minutes here, so I'm gonna try to work on some stuff. I did order all the hardware to mount up the sway bar that we were just working on, but while I'm home on furlough, I figured I'm gonna keep working. So we're gonna go ahead and install the outriggers on this chassis, which is where the cab is going to mount. So these are going to be made out of 2x3 tubing with a bunch of compound 60-degree miters, and then there'll be little extensions where we have like a piece of pipe as a riser, and that's going to serve as the actual cab mount and where the cage will tie into. But let's get started on that. I have some drawings here, very rough sketches. So we're going to have a 55-inch long outrigger. It's going to be 11¼ inches outwards, and that's going to be a 13-inch long piece. So we're going to get everything set up with a saw. We're going to do some test cuts because we want this to be very accurate, and then we're going to start tacking it together on the bench to get the general form together. Once the general form is together, we will get it on the chassis to burn it in. Okay guys, so we got this all cut out. I put some fixturing blocks here on the table and set up a backstop so I can get my distances correct, my angles correct. Got some angle blocks back here to tie the angle at the 60-degree or 120-degree angle here, 60-degree half angles for the cuts. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna rip this off the, leave the backstop, leave the blocks, pull the pieces out, grind them, get them ready to weld, put some clean metal on them, and then we're gonna go ahead and sort of burn those in, tack them in place. And we'll probably do some pretty decent welding. We won't finish weld it per se, but I want to get it pretty tight, just so it doesn't move around before we get on the truck. So let's get started on that. Okay, so we got this all welded together here. You can see how this piece has turned out pretty good. So I typically don't weld and grind my welds down, but I did grind this down because when we're done with it, we're going to slide a piece over top of here that's plasma cut, and there'll be a spot here for the puck, for the cab mount and all that stuff. So this is all going to be a consistent thickness to take that assembly and slide it over both the front and back. So this is gonna be mounted up in there. We still got all the stuff out because we're gonna weld up the next one. Don't need to, show you guys that. You've seen this one, you know what's going on. So the next thing you're gonna see is us putting this together on the chassis. But yeah, I'll get started on this and then we'll go from there. Okay, so the second one's all done here. We got it laid out and I'm really happy with how it came out. The next thing that we did off camera, I just put some 1/2 inch material on the frame plate, on the frame table, and then stacked up some 2-inch thick material here and up here. So you can see we're at 2.5 inches above this surface, the frame surface. That puts us, that this thing is in the middle. So it's a 2 by 3 inch tube and the frame rails are 4 inch. I want 1/2 inch on both sides. We're centering it up. So that's how we have it laid out right now. And I have it clamped in there, so we're gonna do some checks and measurements and make sure it's good to go before we weld it up. Okay, so sorry about the shakiness. I had this hanging off one of those garage door things, and it's so windy that it was knocking the camera around, so don't have like a seizure or anything. Anyways, we got the top and both sides of the Outrigger welded. I didn't weld the bottom because there's a lot of plate and stuff in the way. What we're gonna do is we're gonna move over to the other side, weld the top and sides of those, then we're gonna pull all the fixtures out from underneath and then weld it up. So normally I don't like doing that just because whenever you weld a joint, it has a tendency to pull down towards wherever that heat is flowing. So that might pull the Outriggers down slightly, but they're so solidly affixed everywhere else and have a real tight gap that I'm not particularly worried about it. So real happy with the welds. Everything looks good and clean. That felt really good. All right, we're gonna move on. They're on there solid now. So welded all the way around both sides, and I went ahead and got up here and started jumping on them a little bit just to see how much the chassis flexed with the cab weight on it, and it does not move. Cab's probably gonna be about 450 pounds stripped, and I'm about 235 right now, and I can jump on that thing and it does not feel like it's moving at all. So that's pretty good. So I was worried, you know, over time if this would sag down sort of like that. But even without the cage or the cab, because the cab basically adds a tension member to the top of those outriggers, the perimeter part of the frame, and it does not move. So very happy with that. Everything is very stiff. I think this rear structure gave the chassis a lot of stiffness. So next up, just waiting for the parts to come in, and then we'll finish this up. And I think that'll be it for the episode, but these should be in Saturday, so we'll go from there. Parts came from a Speedway, so let's get this thing bolted together. All right, so there we go. That was not as much fun. I tried to ream out the holes with that drill, and I ended up burning the drill out. Smoke came out of the thing, so I got the die grinder out and started reaming out these holes. Pro tip, if you're going to use something as a sleeve, make sure you get drawn over mantle tubing. That little tubing was ERW stuff, and it's got a little seam in it, makes everything a nightmare. So what we got going on here, we got the bar installed, the arms installed. We have adjustable end links here that we made. This is actually a 5/8 inch upper link and a 1/2 inch lower link just to match the bolt. This is a 1/2 inch fine thread bolt thread on this arm, so we just thread that right in. We're gonna go ahead and put a lock nut on it later, but everything looks pretty good. So we have it adjusted right now with no preload on it. And I think I'm about 1 spline off. I need to take this arm down a spline to get it leveled out. But you can see, if I pick up the rear end, both sides pick up. So the sway bar is nice and tight, not a whole lot of play. I probably have about 1/4 inch of pickup before everything goes tight. And it's not even that really going tight, it's just, that's how much tension is in everything. You need about 1/4 inch of movement, wheel movement on one side before the sway bar really starts to bite. But I'm pretty happy with it. So that's where we're gonna leave it for this episode. I'm very tickled pink with my probably $120 sway bar setup here that's adjustable and ready to go. So very happy with that. Next episode, we're gonna start laying out the coilover mounts and stuff like that, front and rear. And hopefully we can get those on. The front's gonna be a little bit more work than the rear. The rear's just tabs. The front, I'll let you wait till the next episode to see what's going on up there. So, if you guys like what we got going on here, please like and subscribe, and until next time, have a good one.